Welcome back. LGBT activist Peter Tatchell launched a protest earlier this week in Qatar. The Middle Eastern nation has been accused of a myriad of human rights abuses, including the punishment of LGBT people and the exploitation of migrant workers.
It comes less than a month before the start of the FIFA World Cup, which is expected to attract 1.2 million visitors from around the world, which Qatar will be hosting in its capital city of Doha.
Well, we're delighted to say that Peter Tatchell joins us now. Peter, thank you for your time. You were doing your protest about the laws in Qatar. I guess some people might say, look, we might disagree with the laws in other countries, but we should be respectful of them. And just as we wouldn't want them to come and tell us that we should introduce their laws in the UK, why should we go around telling them what laws they should have in their country?
Well, to me, it's very simple. Qatar is a member of the United Nations. All United Nations members are supposed to abide by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that states very clearly that every person on this planet is entitled to equal treatment and protection against discrimination. Qatar defies that, both with regard to LGBT plus people, but also for women and for migrant workers. You know, although my protest was primarily about LGBT plus rights, I feel very strongly at the degrading way in which Qatari women are treated. And many women in Qatar also feel the same way. They want international voices to speak out. You know, in Qatar, a woman has to get permission from a male guardian in order to marry, in order to get certain government jobs, and in order to study abroad and travel. I mean, it's an abrogation of the autonomy and individuality of female people. And I just think that's totally wrong. I think we need to take a stand and say that human rights are universal for everyone.
Peter, I want to understand the planning that went into this for you to even get there on that spot and do this protest, and sort of what happened. How did the police approach you? Could they speak English? I mean, you know, were you scared? Will you fill in some of that story for us?
Well, I've got to tell you, I was terrified. I was shaking. I had a tension headache. My stomach was churning over. At times I was shaking so much I could hardly hold my placard, because I knew very clearly that Qatar is an extremely repressive state, and people who try to protest get arrested, sometimes beaten, and nearly always jailed. So I was aware that that could happen to me, but I felt that something had to be done so that Qatar does not have this huge PR victory of holding the World Cup without voices of dissent and criticism. And in particular,
how did you get into the country? I heard you were concerned that they might have checked your sort of social media. How did you sort of get there, and how did you get in front of the building and make the protest?
Well, it's a very complicated story. Qatar has some of the world's most sophisticated surveillance technology. Every citizen can be tracked. So, for example, for a visitor to enter Qatar, you have to have a COVID app called Eteres, but it's also secret spyware. It can get full access to your mobile phone, read your text, emails, social media, listen to voice messages, everything. So as a well-known critic of Qatar's human rights record, I had to invent a false story. And the false story was that I was going back to Australia to deal with my mother's affairs. She died, sadly, a couple of months ago, and I was going there to deal with her property and possessions and clear them up. And what I did, I booked another flight on the 20th of November, the opening day of the World Cup. And of course, the Qataris, I think, believed that I genuinely was going to Australia to deal with my mother's affairs, but that I was coming back on the 20th of November, the opening day of the World Cup, to do the protest. So that's why I think they let me in. And when I got to immigration, they questioned me a bit, and I had all tourist brochures. I asked them about where's the tourist information office? Will the National, I didn't mention the National Museum, but I said, will the Islamic Arts Museum be open, and so on? And they fell for it.
Peter,
so what happened, I went to the National Museum, a big prestigious building, stood on one of the major roads there, and unfurled a placard, which you saw on the screen, Qatar arrests, jails, and subjects, LGBT plus people, to conversion, a reference to the secret gay conversion centres where LGBT plus people can be detained against their will and subjected to horrible, degrading, vile treatments in a bid to turn them straight.
Peter, the Qataris say that you were just moved on, you weren't arrested. Is that the case? Were you not detained or arrested?
Qatar is trying to minimise the PR damage caused by this protest. So like every dictatorship, they will try and discredit any protester. I can assure you I was held against my will for 49 minutes by a combination of Qatari police and state security officials. They interrogated me relentlessly. They discovered that my colleague, Simon Harris, who travelled completely independently from me, I had no verbal or mobile phone contact with him at all to keep us completely separate because of the surveillance. They discovered him far away filming and photographing the protest. And they went up to him, they grabbed his mobile phone, they deleted all the photos and all the images, all the videos. But fortunately, he'd managed to upload some of them and send them to London before the police could do that. You're right that the police were mainly speaking Arabic, but one of the officers could speak little bits of English and French, which I sort of can, schoolboy French I can do. And plus, he did some of the messages on Google Translate. And one of the messages was, this is an illegal protest. You can be in very, very serious trouble. There are very severe penalties. That's what his Google Translate message said.
And I know you've got to go to another interview. I know you've got to leave us. But did you think this protest has been successful? Is this the start of something? What do you want the end point to be? Because the World Cup is pretty soon.
The aim of the protest was not the protest itself. It was to use the protest to get international media attention in order to raise public consciousness and to put pressure on public officials, like Prince William, who, to his great credit, has agreed not to go to the World Cup. So I think it's opened up a conversation, which I hope others will continue. And people in Qatar who asked me to do this protest, they say they hope others will follow what I've done to keep the pressure on the regime. It is a dictatorship. It's a police state. We shouldn't be going there. We shouldn't be giving it credibility and kudos.